Hello and welcome to another Penguin Palace video. I'm Sharon, I'm the owner of Penguin Palace. Today I'm super excited because we have some really special products to introduce to you guys. These products are truly revolutionary, they're nothing like you've seen before, and I'm sure you're gonna love them. Some of you may know that we were supposed to launch this end of July. However, due to the pandemic and among other reasons, we had to defer it unfortunately. But I've been working super hard on this and I'm just so happy that I finally get to share this with the crafting community. So like many of you, I love working with stencils. So as you know, most stencils that we see out there today are in forms of squares or rectangles. Of course, there are tons of great designs out there, and I know a lot of us like to use different colors or different medium on stencils. Sometimes we even overlap them in certain ways, but what we get from a stencil is still somewhat limited, unless perhaps we spend extra time to further apply masking techniques as we create. Well, and then I thought about how we could make stencils even more fun to work with. And how would it be possible to get more variations to a background using the same stencil, or build interesting and more complex designs and even colorful wreaths using a single stencil? In addition, have the advantage of not requiring any masking if say we wanted to use different colors on different parts of a stencil. And therefore these are the reasons that I came up with this idea. Ladies and gentlemen, introducing the Stencils 360. So as you may have guessed correctly, this new tool allows us to work with circular stencils for the first time. So first let's talk about the material that we've chosen. These are made of PETG and PET, which are essentially strong, lightweight plastics. They're a lot stronger than your typical acrylic. They're super durable and have great resistance to impact. And notice that we've added a full layer of white print on the back, so that whether you have a light workspace or a dark or even black workspace like mine, you'll still be able to see clearly all the prints on this tool. They're a lot more flexible than acrylic, however they do tend to get scratched a little easier because of their flexibility. But scratches just mean that you're doing a lot of crafting. So now let's talk about the components of this new tool. First, what we have is our base, and this is the foundation of everything. Next, we have 3 pieces of guide rings. We have an 8-inch guide ring, a 6-inch guide ring, and a 4-inch guide ring. And finally, we have what we call the paper positioner. We have first the 7.5-inch, a 7-inch, a 6-inch, a 4 3/4, a 4-inch, and finally the standard 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. As you can see, there's a specific paper size that's printed on each of the pieces, and so you'll know exactly which piece you're grabbing for. So altogether we have a total of 10 pieces. So the best way to explain how this tool works is of course with examples. And today I'm going to do 2 examples. In the first example, I'm going to use this stencil right here. This is 8 inches in diameter, and it is called the Summer Blossom, which is part of this new release. So now let's look more closely at the base. As I mentioned, this is the foundation of everything. So at the top, you see the Stencils 360 logo. Apart from that, most importantly, you'll see a series of circles on there. Each circle has a different scale, and each scale marks a specific turning interval. So let's zoom in so you can see a little bit better. So starting from the outermost circle, we have the 15-degree turning intervals represented by the squares. And as we go along, we have 22.5 degrees represented by hearts, 30 degrees represented by circles, and 45 degrees represented by triangles. You'll also notice that on each scale, the symbols are alternating between filled solids and unfilled hollow shapes. This notation will come in handy at certain times, as per our first example. So now let's take a look at the stencil. In this release, the stencils are categorized in 3 different series. The first series is called the single barrel, as you see right here. We also have the double barrel series where you have 2 stencils in each set, and the multi-barrel series where you have 3 stencils in each set. So first thing that you may ask is that what is the advantage of working with a circular stencil versus a square or a rectangular stencil? So with these circular stencils and in combination with this new tool, they allow us to rotate the stencil in a systematic way so that we can build gorgeous overlapping geometric patterns. So in the past, you might have tried rotating your stencil by quarter turns or perhaps 45-degree turns, but this tool allows us to get even more precise with the amount of rotation and therefore giving us a lot more possibilities. In a minute, you're going to see that it is super easy to create beautiful designs in just a matter of minutes. You'll also notice that there's a marker at the top of the stencil, and this is what we call the alignment marker, and it comes in one of 5 shapes: a square, a heart, a circle, or a triangle, which all correspond to the symbols that you see on the base. And the final shape that you might see on the stencil is a star, as you can see right here on the summer blossom. So this marker actually serves 2 purposes. First, you're going to use it to align your stencil at the starting point, and you will also use it to mark the stops as you rotate your stencil. And secondly, it's going to tell you whether it has a recommended turning interval to follow in order to achieve its intended design. For example, if you see a square here, it means that you will need to rotate your stencil at 15-degree intervals during the blending process, meaning that you're going to make reference to the outermost scale on the base, since that scale is represented by squares. And sometimes you'll find that it's not a must to follow the recommended turning interval, but it's just a recommendation. And if you see a star marker, feel free to try different turning intervals in order to get different results. Sometimes you may even see 2 circles or 2 triangles, which correspond to 60 and 90-degree turning intervals respectively. So let's start with our first example. As you can see, I have the base taped down onto my Tim Holtz craft mat. Our base is approximately 14.5 by 14.5 inches. It is a little bit taller than my craft mat. So all I'm using is 2 pieces of tape on each side to make sure that the base doesn't move around. And for this example, I'm using a piece of 6-inch by 6-inch cardstock, and therefore I am grabbing the 6-inch paper positioner. And I'm just basically sliding it into the base. You'll also see this little arrow up top. All you need to do is line it up to 12 o'clock. Then I'm just going to take some removable tape and run it on the back of the cardstock and just stick it inside this 6-inch window. Then I'm simply going to remove the paper positioner, and then you'll be left with a 6-inch piece of cardstock right in the middle of your base. So since we're using an 8-inch stencil, we're just simply going to slide in the 8-inch guide ring. And you'll notice that there are 4 hatched areas on your guide ring. And these are spots where you're going to apply some tapes. So this is going to stop your guide ring from moving around, and it's going to also prevent the stencil sliding underneath your guide ring as you rotate your stencil. So when you're using a stencil of 6 inches in diameter, then you'll be grabbing the 6-inch guide ring. And similarly for a 4-inch stencil, you'll be grabbing the 4-inch guide ring. Also, when I work with my 4-inch guide ring, I find it a little easier to just use 2 pieces of tape instead of 4, just because of the smaller size stencil. Okay, now we're ready to place the stencil into the guide ring. And don't worry if the stencil is not a perfect fit to the guide ring, because it doesn't have to be. As normal practice, our stencils and guide rings, they do have a fabrication tolerance. In our case, the tolerance is approximately plus or minus a millimeter. Sometimes you may find that your stencil will have a little bit of wiggle room, which is fine. Or sometimes you may find that it is a little bit bigger than the inner diameter of your guide ring, which is also perfectly okay. So you can see I'm just lining up the alignment marker along the 12 o'clock point. So I'm going to use Distress Oxide ink to start the blending. I'm using shaded lilac. So I'm just applying medium pressure as I blend. And as you can see, I'm just applying a little bit of pressure to the stencil. And I'm not using any tape. I'm not taping down my stencil. There's no need to do that. You can of course use different colors as you blend. However, in this example, I'm just going to keep it relatively simple. I'm also using the same color on my lower petal. So in this example, I'm going to choose the 22.5-degree turning intervals. So the way I like to rotate the stencil is by keeping two fingers on one side of the stencil and then gently just rotating with the other hand. So I know that for this card, I want alternating colored petals. So instead of changing colors on every turn and having to clean my stencil on every turn, I will only make references to the solid hearts and skipping the hollow ones during my first round of inking. So from the 12 o'clock starting point, I'm going to go straight to the first solid heart and then start blending again. So next I'm going to again skip the hollow heart and then go on to the next solid one. So there are no calculations or any math involved. We are just focusing and making references to the symbols. And we're just working with one of those four scales and ignoring the rest. So since this stencil is a mirrored image, I only need to go halfway around the circle and my first round of inking will be completed. And then I'm just gonna lift up the stencil and you can see how beautiful the geometric pattern looks. And now I'm going to go ahead and clean my stencil. Next, I'm going to be using Twisted Citron to complete my second round of inking, and this time I will be referencing to only the hollow hearts. And for this type of stencil, there's no need to line up everything perfectly in order to get a good result. So as you can see, I'm only referencing to the hollow hearts as I rotate my stencil. So as I lift up the stencil, you'll see this gorgeous piece of art. So throughout this whole process, the cardstock stayed on the craft mat. There was no need to rotate the paper or flipping the stencil. So all I did was rotate and blend, rotate and blend. So with the wide range of scales on this new tool, it provides us a great platform to create stunning geometric patterns in a methodical yet easy way, where in the past this would be rather difficult to achieve. So next I'm getting rid of the removable adhesive on the back of my card with the new Adhesive Eraser. This is a very handy tool to have and will be part of the starter kit. And I like that it comes in pink. So to finish off this card, I'm using one of the images from Heartfelt Notes. This stamp set is also one of the stamp sets from our new release. And as you can see, this image fits perfectly in the middle. Then I use our Platinum Charm heavyweight cardstock as the card base. I love that it's got a nice shimmer to it, and I thought the silvery tone really goes well with this card. So in my second example, I'll be using this new stencil called the Floral Wreath. I'll be showing you how to create a multicolored wreath with this single stencil and also without any masking. So we'll start by putting the 6-inch paper positioner into the base, as we're going to be using a 6 by 6 inch cardstock. Again, we are lining up the arrow to the 12 o'clock position. Then we'll apply removable adhesive and then put our cardstock into the window. Since my stencil is 8 inches in diameter, I'm replacing the paper positioner with the 8-inch guide ring. I'm also recycling my tapes. You'll notice that the alignment marker on the stencil is a triangle, meaning that we need to rotate the stencil at 45-degree intervals in order to achieve its intended design. And remember, we're not doing any calculations, we're simply making reference to the symbols on the scale. So as compared to the previous stencil, this one requires a little bit more precision. So in order to get good results for this wreath, we want to make sure that we're turning on the same pivot point throughout the process. So what we're doing is we're putting a little marker in the center of this stencil. And this is exactly why there's a little pinhole right in the center. So this marker is a good indication in making sure that we are keeping on the same pivot point throughout the rotating process. As I mentioned before, your stencil might not be an exact fit to the guide ring due to fabrication tolerances, and that's totally fine. This pivot marker will take care of this, and if you stick with it, you're going to get great results. So now we're going to be using different colors on different elements on this stencil. So you can see that for the design, I've kept different elements of the stencil far enough apart so that we can apply different colors to different elements at the same time without the need for masking. In areas where you see the elements are closer together, you might find it easier if you use a smaller brush. So after first round of inking, we will be rotating the stencil at 45 degrees by following the symbol on the scale. And in this example, I'm going to stick with the same colors on every turn, so this time I won't be skipping any symbols. And as you proceed, don't forget to check that you're still rotating on the same pivot point throughout. So as you blend, make sure that you don't have too much ink on your brush. Otherwise, you're going to find that the extra ink will seep through the stencil and you won't get that fine detail. So after this round of inking, I'm rotating my stencil another 45 degrees and also checking the pivot point once again and blend away. You will notice the pattern starting to form as you blend and rotate. If you feel unsure, just keep going, and I'm sure you'll get better at this with a few practice runs. So as you see the pattern forming, sometimes you might need to adjust or shift the stencil just a little bit in order to get the right alignment or the right pattern. But of course, you don't want to deviate from the pivot point. And I should point out that if you find your stencil just a little bit smaller than the guide ring and you see a little gap between the stencil and the ring, just beware that you're not blending too close to the edge. Otherwise, you might get unwanted ink on your paper accidentally. So now as I lift my stencil, you're gonna see this gorgeous, beautiful, colorful wreath. So there was no cleaning my stencil in between, and there was no masking needed, and because of this, it saves us a lot of time. And now I'm just erasing that little pencil mark and simply using baby wipes to clean my stencil. So I'll take off the guide ring and slowly peel off the cardstock, and you got yourself a beautiful piece of art. I know a lot of us like to build wreaths using stems, which is a lot of fun, but it's not often that we can do that with a single stencil. Imagine if you had this entire pattern carved out on a stencil. It would be nearly impossible to apply masking and to apply different colors to different elements on the stencil. But this new tool, along with the specially designed circular stencil, allow us to do just that. So to complete the card, I'm using another image from the same stem set. I'm simply using Versamark ink, and I'll be heat embossing the sentiment "We're in this together" on the center of the card. Then I took this heavyweight black shimmery cardstock. It's called the Mysterious Galaxy from our collection, and I used that as the card base. So to sum it up, I truly believe that the new Stencils 360 is a great tool for creating the most gorgeous geometric patterns. And with this and our innovative circular stencils, it is now possible to get a much wider range of rotations, and therefore creating special layering effects. You can also get different variations even with just a single stencil. You're now able to create beautiful multicolor stencil backgrounds or wreaths without using marker coloring, while minimizing the time needed for tracing and masking just to ink up certain elements or areas of a stencil. In later videos, I will also show you how to use multiple stencils, mixing and matching different sizes to create different designs. The reason that I love this tool is because it saves me time. It's so easy to use and it's just so much fun to play with. So I really hope that you enjoy this gadget as much as I do. I apologize for this long video, and I hope you're gonna have lots of fun with it, and I can't wait to see your creations. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.